let's try either the white background or we can also try this black background. Today, let's work on the nature of code exercise 0.1. Create a random walker that has a greater tendency to move down and to the right. So first of all, we need to create a random walker, and then let's see how we can change the tendency. Let's dive right in. So in our p5.js web editor, I'm going to first create a class, and a class essentially is a template for creating virtual objects that has similar properties and similar functionality, since able to do same things. So that way, once you create one class, and then you can reuse the code and create multiple virtual objects to do the same thing. And that is a part of a programming concept that's called object-oriented programming. So let's try to write a class. In order to write a class, I'm going to start with the keyword class and then followed by the name of the class. That is going to be walker. And as a convention, we usually use a capitalized word as the name of the class to indicate that is a class. And then what's important about a class is to have a constructor. And what a constructor does, I missed the parenthesis here. So what constructor does, is to be used to construct this object. So once you, again, class is part of the template, and later on we will be using this class to create a walker object. And in order to do that, that's when the constructor function is going to be called, so that there's some initialization that will be happening about the walker. So what are some of the things that needs to be initialized? First, we need to know the position of the walker. So x, and where do we want it to be? For now, let's use width divided by 2. So at the middle of the screen. And then y is going to be height divided by 2. So again, that's going to be right at the center of the screen. So that's the initial state of this class, or the object, more specifically the object I later created. Oh, and I forgot to put this dot. So in order to associate a variable to the class, we need to write this dot and then the variable name that we want to give. That basically that means this variable x will be attached to that class. So that we can later use the dot notation to use it to change the value, and so on and so forth. So that's constructor. We initialize the position, and then what are some of the things that the walker needs to do? It needs to walk, or just to follow the nature of code kind of examples convention of using the function step. So step is to move one step, and that is going. So this is where the bulk of the whole exercise happens, which is where exactly is it going to move? Which direction should it move? Let's actually leave it right there, because so far we're writing a little bit of code and we can't really see what's happening there. So that's usually not a good sign. As in, if we don't see what's happening, it's more likely that we're going to make mistakes. So I'm going to try to draw something first, so that it helps with our debug, and it helps visualize what's happening. So before finishing the step function, or sometimes it's also called the method of that class. So let's create a function called show. And also notice how when we create a function or methods as part of the class, we don't use the function keyword, because that's part of the class. That's how you write the class in the JavaScript language. And just that's something to be aware of. So show, what exactly do I mean by show? So that is a function that will be used to display the walker. And I'm going to use the, let's see, I'm going to use draw it as a point, So the point function, which just draws a dot on the screen. And where do I want to draw it? It's going to be this dot x and this dot y. And let's first of all run the code. So first of all, there's no error. That's great. But I'm still not showing I'm not seeing the walker. Why? That is because we've only defined a template, and then we need to create more virtual objects based on that template. And to do that, I'm going to first define a variable that's called walker. Note how I'm using the lowercase this time. So that way we know that it's a variable and not the class itself. And if you want to create more variables, you can then, that variable essentially you can just name it anything that you like. And setup. So instead of a setup, we're going to create an instance of that class with the keyword new. So I'm going to create a new walker, like so. Once that's done, we have this virtual object that's been held inside of this walker, the lowercase walker variable. And then instead of draw, we can call the function with the dot notation walker dot show. And now we should see this dot. It's super tiny. Actually, I don't think it's zoomed in. It's probably not zoomed in on the in the recording. I'm going to zoom in like this. Yeah, you can kind of see a little bit of a little dot right there. And actually, just to make it more visible, just temporarily instead of a dot, I'm going to draw a circle just so that it's easier to see on whatever screen that you might be using. And I'm going to give it a 50 pixel diameter. So that's where that walker is currently located. And so now we can see the walker. That means everything else so far, everything is going well so far. So now I can focus on the step function. And so step function. So where do we want this random walker to step? And I'm going to start by recreating the random walker from the native code book. And I'm going to try to use a different approach. And I will be using a random using the random function. And let's see, we can use the random function and create a random value. So I'm using the const because I will not be changing this value within this function. So const random value equals to random. And that way we can kind of display this variable with the console.log, so random value. And let's put it inside of draw function. So right now it's not showing because we are not calling this function. So before the show, I'm going to do walker dot step. So now you'll see every frame it's going to create a new variable because every frame we want it to move at a different direction or a random direction. That's why it's called a random walker. But then how do I transform this variable to the actual movement? That I'm going to start writing an if statement, so I don't need this console log anymore. So, and then I can use this so if I want the probability to be equal, what I can do is to divide. So random function will produce a random number anywhere from 0 to 1. So if I want to divide it to 4 equal parts, that is going to be 0 to, so like if we want to divide this number 0 to 1, range from 0 to 1 to like 4 equal ranges, it's going to be either this number is going to be random value smaller than 0.25, or if this is easier, we can do it as a quarter. So when it's less than a quarter, else if random value is larger than larger than or equal to 1/4, and random value is smaller than 2/4, which is a half. And else if random value is larger than or equal to 2/4 and smaller than 3/4. And finally, we can add that condition, or we can just leave it as else. Basically, otherwise, if it's not within the 3, that is going to be the last one. So that is going to be the fourth condition. So we have 4 equal conditions, like 4 conditions of equal probability. And then we can change the step. So step, which direction you want it to step. So let's say the first, in the first case, we're going to let it move to the right. I'm going to start with the right direction, which is x plus 1, and then dot x, and then if I want this to move, this second one is going to be x to the left, and then y to the y, increase the y, and then decrease the y. Yeah, so that's the 4 different possibilities. And this is a shorthand for this dot x plus 1. So let me try to expand it. So basically they're the same. But for clarity, I'm going to expand it. Equals to this y minus 1. Now let's try to run this. Now you see how it's already behaving similar to the random walker in the native code book. And I'm going to, one thing I need to do is move the background. So right now it's a random walker that moves around but doesn't leave a trace. If we want to leave that trace, we are going to move the background to the setup. I can put it either here or lower. So the difference here is that if we have the background inside of draw, then every time before we draw the new walker, it's going to, or the new position of the walker, it's going to use the background to cover the entire canvas. That way, you can't see the previous walker. But if we move the background inside of a setup, which happens only once, then the draw function will keep drawing on top of the previous drawing. That's how it leaves this mark. And since I was using a circle, that's why it looks like this. We can kind of change it back to the point. Now that's the regular or the traditional random walker we just created. So now what we are going to do is to improve this random walker a little bit before we move on to the other probability, which is to add a step size. So I'm going to add a step size as part of the walker. So right now, let's start with 1. And then I'm going to change all these 1 to this dot step size. This 1 to this dot step size. This gives us the flexibility of adjusting the step size, especially considering that sometimes if you want to use it as a circle, for instance, in this case, maybe we can increase the step size. So step size 10, so that even though it's a circle, it still makes a little more sense. And now let's go back to the exercise. So we created a random walker, but we want the random walker to have a greater tendency to move down and to the right. That at this point is really a matter of changing these range of numbers. So if we wanted to have a greater chance to move it down, that means we want to increase the probability, basically make this third range, because this y plus step size, that's the condition where the random walker moves down, and to the right, that is the first case. Yeah, to the right, where x move to the right, x plus step size. So let's increase the possibility here. So we can make this probability. Let's see. I'm going to switch to fractions, to decimal, so it's easier to read. So 0.5, that's like half of the chance it's going to be here. Or maybe let's do 0.4. In this case, it's going to be larger than 0.4. This is to move to the left. And then to 0.5, so there's like 10% probability. And here it's going to be 0.5. And then if we want to also give 40%, it's going to be 0.9. And finally, that is going to 0.1. Yeah. And now let's run this. See how it's not 100%. Again, we are changing the likelihood, so it's always trying to move to the right and to the bottom. And let's finally switch this back to the point and also change the step size to 1. Now we have a walker that has more tendency to move to the right and to the bottom. And there's a few other things that we can change actually. So this part is actually a little bit redundant. Because of the way the if and else if are arranged, the first condition will only be met if the random value is smaller than 0.4. Then the second, so as soon as we get to the second condition, that means this random value is already larger than 0.4, because otherwise the first condition is going to be met. That's why this part is actually not necessary. So this is not necessary. This just make our code a little bit easier to read. This way, 0.4, 0.5, 0.9, we know that between the first two conditions, in the first condition, it's 40% likelihood. In the second condition, it's between 0.5 and 0.4, so that's 10%. And then the third condition is between 0.5 and 0.9, so that is 40%. And the last one, we have 10% left. So that's the likelihood. And we can also delete this just to clean this up a little bit. So now we've, let me try to save this. We just created a random walker that has a greater tendency to move it down and to the right. So for now, the exercise has finished, but I'm going to go over and increase this random walker class a little bit. So you can stop watching now if that's all you need. But I'm going to add, improve the random walker class a little bit. So right now, if we want to have multiple random walker, what we're going to do is let's try to create a new random walker. So random walker, this one I'm going to call it walker 1. Again, just to double check, make sure everything works, so I didn't make any mistake there. And walker 2. And walker 2 equals to new walker. So this is the benefits of creating a class. That way I can easily create a new walker. So walker 2 and the step and walker 2 dot show. Now you see we have two walkers, but it's starting at the same point because we define that the walker is always starting at the center. What if we want to have two walkers that's starting at different points on the canvas? That's where we can truly utilize the benefits of having a class, which is to add some parameters of this walker in the constructor. So in the constructor, we can specify the initial x, the initial y, and then also the step size. And now we can replace, instead of always at the center, we can replace that with initial x and initial y, and then step size. So this way, what this does is it's similar to how a function works when we have three parameters, and those three parameters we will need to provide later when we create this walker to specify where we want this walker to start and also what the step size we want it to have. And then later on, it's going to be the walker will be based on those values. So now if I run the code, it's going to be an error because we did not provide the arguments that are needed for the walker. So if you want the first one to start at the center, width divided by 2, height divided by 2, and then step size 1. I'm also going to do a edit tidy code and run the code. This way, we just created the first one. There's still error because we haven't created the second one yet. So the second one we can start, let's say we can start at the top right and also step size 1. So now we have two walkers. We have two walkers starting at different places. And we can even change the step size for the second walker. But of course, it doesn't make so much sense to have a larger step size if the walker itself is a dot. But this is also interesting visual effects. So depending, really, at that point, it really depends on what you want to do. And then we can also create multiple ones, and using array. And I just noticed that I forgot to create a new sketch. So I think I'm going to do some reduce. Okay, about here. So this is the original walker right there. And I'm going to create another one. And this is going to be expand or plus. Yeah, maybe for now I might change the name later. For now, plus, yeah. I'll just add extra one for now, but I need to think about how I'm going to name this later. And then I'm going to because I copied all the code, so now back to the original one, back to the one where we had two walkers. And in addition to this, let's make it even more fun with an array. So instead of walker variable, I'm going to create an array that's called walkers. And then how many walkers do I want to have? Let's see. I can call it, yeah, I like to make it explicit, the name to be easier to read, descriptive. So walkers number. And over here, walker, I'm going to define, I can define the walker's number here. So walker number, let's say I want to have 8. And I'm going to write a for loop. So for let I equal to 0, I smaller than the walker's number, I plus plus. And inside, this is going to be quite different. Inside, it's going to be walkers.push to add to that array. Also, yeah, in order to initialize the array, we use the square brackets to equal an empty array, and then so that I can push to that array to add an element to the array. What do I want to push? Let's create a walker here. So walker equals to new walker. And for now, let's start with the center. Actually, in this case, I might just want to keep everything at the center. We'll see. And then push that walker inside. So now I have multiple walker. But of course, there's going to be error if I run the code because there's a few more lines of code that I need to change. So I don't need any of these anymore. Instead, I'm going to create a for loop. Let I equal to 0 and I smaller than walker's number, I plus plus. And walkers dot step, walkers I dot step, and walkers I dot show. Now we have multiple walkers that's moving towards right, and moving down and to the right. So now instead of letting the walker always start at the center, what if we start at a random position? I'm going to delete that. So random width and random height. That way, the random walker is always going to start at a random location on the canvas. And let's take a look. And what if we increase the value? Increase this number of walkers to, let's say, 100. Okay. Yeah. And what if it's 1,000? Yeah. Yeah, it starts to look really interesting. And I kind of don't like the fact that the top left is left out to like pretty. The top left is a bit of there's a lot of white space there. So instead of starting at 0, so with random width, the smallest possible value is 0, and the largest possible value is width. We can also define the minimum value. So instead of 0, let's see, let's move it to the left by negative 100, just so that there's also some of the walker that's starting to the left side. That way the screen, yeah, this looks a little more even. And also, what if we add a random color to it as well? And so that is going to be added. That is actually slightly more complicated than, yeah. Okay. Let's do that together. And so basically what I'm trying to say is, what I'm going to do is to add a random color to each random walker. Because of that, I'm going to add an additional property to this walker, and that is going to be color. And we can use, there are a few different ways to define color. Let's use the color function and then use random function to define 255. So that is to define a color, or specifically gray color, anywhere from 0 to 255. And now this is part of the walker, and let's use that color. Make sure to use that color. So point will be colored with the stroke function. It's considered the stroke, and this dot color. So now it's always different color. Yeah, and maybe the background. The background is 220 is fine. Maybe, yeah, let's try either the white background, or we can also try this black background. Yeah. So I think I should stop here and let you explore. There are really a lot of possibilities with the random walker, and I would really love to see what you come up with this. And also let me know in comments if you like the video, so that I know that I should be creating more nature of code video. And really thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.